Okay, so one final video in this very short playlist, I'm going to discuss how we have been measuring inequality and the big solid barrier that there is between elite institutions being able to see the stuff that I'm talking about. Well, they should have seen it like 8-9 years ago because we've just undermined the rule of law and crisis are now going to correct. And I'm going to talk about how we've been measuring inequality for quite a long time and what components were required for that to be functioning, because in order for these systems to function, lots of components have to be functioning, and they're currently not, and I can demonstrate that just by sitting here. So what we have been doing is basically we have been using very complex but fixed statistical models, and then within these statistical models we chuck in a bit of rules. No, really. We chuck in the symbolism of the benefit claimant, and then we go get some public opinion that's been measured on the basis of tabloids, because we know we'll get the answers that we want, and then we go, look, the public really wants us to keep battering welfare claimants, and that's democracy, so that's what our benefit system's going to do. And there is nothing in there about equality legislation, there is nothing in there about child abuse, or, you know, about violence, or about the fact, you know, about what these systems do. They haven't looked at institutional functioning for 30 years, 40 years. While there are institutional economists, they're on the fringes, and this is the core business model, and this fits with all our other economics. So they view this as the flip side of economics. So because they do this, they don't understand the relationship between our economics and social policy, and they don't understand what a cash transfer system does, and they don't understand where cash transfer spending is corrosive and where it's not, and they don't understand how these systems link different bits of the economy, because they've been using these models. So what these models require, really, are a number of things. So what they need is a media landscape where there can just be broadcast, because this is a maladaptive shame mechanism that they've made out of an economic model. So the only way that this can keep doing what it's doing effectively is if we have a media landscape where there's no feedback. Because once there's feedback, people might say, hang on a minute, that's going over the rule of law. Right, well, up until social media, that was the case. And now the newspapers aren't selling, the Guardian are in a toxic little bubble online, the tabloids are dying, and social media has introduced a social element to political communication, and the centre-left have undone the parasitic dynamic that existed. So, you know, that's not in place anymore. Now, the other thing is that actually these models and disciplines start to fall apart as soon as you put them into context. So Thomas Piketty, blew up the economics world because he put one stream of actual data. He looked at one stream of data from tax returns. So instead of looking at synthetic models, which is what this is, which, you know, they just create reflections of themselves, he looked at the actual data himself. He didn't have any structured context for it because he couldn't see these systems, and all the literature from Piketty and Galbraith and Atkinson is saying exactly the same thing. Economics does not have structured context within which to look at this data, but just looking at one stream of data, put all these other economic models that we've been using for 30 years into context, and you all saw the reaction that Piketty's book got. It could have been done in 300 pages if you ask me. But this is the problem. There is an absolute barrier. This is how they view these systems. This is how they protect themselves from seeing these systems, and then all of a sudden they can't because they've opened a multidisciplinary research centre, and what will happen regardless now, even though the intake will probably be highly privileged young people, there'll be lots of Corbynites and lots of people who don't want to reflect on their identity because rich people don't. What will still happen is disciplines are going to go to the Inequalities Institute and be put into context, and they're going to fall apart. And that's going to happen as crisis creates. Because what crisis are now going to do is, for 8 years, a bunch of institutions have said, we didn't know the rule of law existed. Now there's going to be a bunch of crises to tell them, well, the rule of law existed and you didn't know it was there and you undermined it. And those crises have to play out, and we can't speed them up. But the only way to get that multidimensional understanding of inequality is through crisis. And what I found at the LSE is that up until social media and up until now, this knowledge could not get to them. I couldn't have gone to the LSE because social work wasn't a degree. That's only a recent thing. The only reason I could go to the Inequalities Institute was because they made social work a degree. they've just opened higher education to working class people, which means that this model of kind of narcissistic word salad that existed at this level should kind of go and start to blow. But in the meantime, the crisis the country's got to get through is Brexit, which is more or less directly caused by this. So at present, at that level, you know, you can say, I'm talking about a welfare system with several million people in it that's killed people. I'm talking about the deaths of thousands of people. I'm talking about a social care system that's actively harming, you know, hundreds and thousands of vulnerable people. And I'm talking about a child protection system where children are literally highly, you know, being harmed as we speak. And the only thing that they can hear is their identity, because but I identify as good, and my model works, and my discipline works, and my institution is good. And you go, and I'm not saying you're not good. I'm saying that crisis. And so you can't actually say to any of these people, you have power, and this is, so crisis is now going to force them to reflect on what they don't know, and we're all just caught in the middle of it. So I don't know how much of it sense that video made either, really. I might watch it back.